Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning for another Concrete Ontario webinar. Today's topic is all about the 2020 air permitting requirements. My name is Alan Carey. I'm the Director of Technical Services at Concrete Ontario, and I will be your facilitator this morning. As always, before we do get started, I just want to run through some housekeeping items for new attendees who may not be familiar with how we run the webinar process. This will be approximately a 35 to 40-minute webinar, and we're going to leave some time at the end for questions. All participants are currently muted and will remain that way for the duration of the webinar. If you do have any questions, please use your go-to webinar questions pane on the right side of your screen and type in your questions. We will be addressing all questions at the end. This webinar will be recorded and posted on the Concrete Ontario YouTube channel. And we will also be emailing a PDF copy of the presentation and a link to the YouTube video to all participants to simplify accessing the information. Now, from an association standpoint, today's topic is very important. We do have over 280 eco-certified plants in Ontario, meaning that each plant that is certified has to have an environmental compliance approval, or an ECA. So an ECA is a mandatory requirement of our plant certification program. We were made aware of the 2020 air permitting requirements at our last Environment Committee meeting back in April, and we want to get ahead of the problem before the MOECC auditors start visiting plants and enforcing the new air permitting requirements. Now, we did issue a bulletin back on May 3rd about the changes that are coming in 2020, and we thought it was very important to have this webinar to bring in an expert that can provide an overview of what members need to do to stay in compliance with the MOE. In addition, also having an expert here to answer questions is going to be very, very valuable, and it's going to shed some light on what this really means for the industry. Now, having said that, that leads me to introduce our presenter today. Good morning, Winnie. How are you?
Good morning. Good. How are you, Alan?
Good. Now, Winnie is from BCX Environmental. She's actually the X in BCX, and she's a senior environmental engineer and senior air modeling specialist. Winnie's efforts involve emission inventory development and advanced air dispersion modeling for simple and complex facilities in support of ECAs, environmental activity and sector registries, air quality studies, site plan approvals, rezoning applications, and annual reporting. Winnie has extensive experience in ECA applications for ready-mix concrete batching plants and provides regulatory training for BCX's industrial clients. Again, thank you very much, Winnie, for being here this morning. This is a very important topic for our industry, and I'll turn it over to you now to just provide an overview of what all this really means for our members.
Great. Thank you, Alan, for the awesome introduction this morning. So thanks to Concrete Ontario again for giving us this opportunity to share our knowledge about the 2020 air permitting requirement. So this is today's agenda. So we'll start off with an overview about the 2020 air requirements. After that, we would like to show you a quick way of determining if your facility is currently meeting the 2020 requirements. And if not, we'll have a quick discussion and review about the scenarios to meet the 2020 compliance. And then after that, we'll have a quick review of the requirements for a Schedule 3 compliance assessment, followed by the next steps. So first, let's take a look at the 2020 air requirement. To talk about air quality in Ontario, I want to introduce or review one definition that's very unique for this province. It is called the Point-of-Impingement standard. So in Ontario, the Regulation 419 is the regulation that governs air quality in this province. It sets out the rules for environmental compliance approvals for air, or air ECAs. So in our province, the air quality standards for air permitting are set for the maximum modeled POI concentrations using a ministry regulatory air dispersion model. But now for those members that have never come across POI before, you're going to be wondering, what are you talking about? What does that mean in English? Okay, so in other jurisdictions, people tend to set limits on the air emissions, the amount you emit from the site. But in Ontario, we're looking at a modeled ambient air concentration and from your facility, and then you must meet the air limits at beyond your property line for that limit. So these limits are called POI standards. Under 419, the POI standards are phased according to the timelines in the regulation. Specifically, by February 1st, 2020, the ministry will phase out the Schedule 2, half-hour Schedule 2 POI standards and the Reg 346 model, and instead require all facilities that have an air permit to assess those emissions against Schedule 3 POI standards using an advanced dispersion model such as AERMOD. So after February 2020, the Ministry District Office will be asking you to confirm that you have assessed your facility to the Schedule 3 standards during their site inspection. So February 1st, 2020 is really coming. I thought about putting in winter's coming, but it's not as scary, but we just need to get ready for it. So now you're going to be wondering, how do you know if you meet the 2020 requirements? Well, for ready-mix plants that haven't really amended the permit in the last few years, it's very likely that the emission summary and dispersion modeling report, or we call it the ESPM report, that supports your ECA, are using the Schedule 2 standards and the 346 model. And you can check that quickly by looking at the emission summary table in the ESPM report. And I'll show you how to look at that in the next slide. So here are some examples. So if you look at the table on the top, which you will usually find this table in the executive summary of your ESPM report, the averaging period, if your averaging period is half hour and the corresponding schedule is number 2, you are in Schedule 2. But if you look at the example below, which has significantly more contaminants in it, and the averaging period is mostly 24 hours, and the corresponding regulation schedule is Schedule 3, then you have a Schedule 3 ESPM report. If you have a Schedule 3 report, you don't have to do anything at this point unless you need an amendment, but if you're Schedule 2, actions will be required. So for those who are in Schedule 2, what do you do? Let's take a look at some of the compliance scenarios. So the first question you want to ask yourself is, has your facility made any changes since the air permit was issued? Changes could include equipment, operations, and/or property line. If your answer is yes, you will need to amend your ECA and submit an application to the ministry. And then as part of the application, you will need to submit an updated ESPM report using the Schedule 3 standards and AERMOD, along with all the application forms and the MOE review fee. But as well, if the changes you made will trigger a change in the noise assessment or the acoustic assessment report, then you have to submit an updated AAR as well. Just want to point out the changes and that will trigger a change to the AAR would include things like your operating schedule. If you used to be running from 7 to 7, now you're going 24/7. That's a change to noise. Or you're adding noise sources or receptors nearby, such as there's new homes built near you that hasn't been assessed before, or you increase your production rate, which result in a change in the noise level. In these cases, you will be required to submit an updated AER. Going back to the question, if your answer is no, you haven't made any changes, then there will be no amendment required. In this case, all you have to do is an updated compliance assessment using Schedule 3 standards and AERMOD, and have it ready at the site and to be able to prove to the district that you've done the assessment when they visit. So what are the requirements within the Schedule 3 compliance assessment? So there are two components in this assessment. The first one is called the emission inventory. The second piece is dispersion modeling. So for a Schedule 3 emission inventory, because the averaging periods for most standards in Schedule 3 are 24 hours, this emission inventory will be based on a daily worst case scenario. For those that have a Schedule 2 report right now, the assessment was calculated based on an hourly or 30-minute worst case scenario. So if your facility does not run 24/7, your maximum daily emission rate will be lower than the current hourly or 30-minute emission rate. For the second component, air dispersion modeling, the regulatory model for Schedule 3 is an advanced dispersion model called AERMOD. AERMOD allows site-specific inputs and has more options to characterize sources. The results are therefore more representative than the very simple 346 model. Now, because I'm a modeler for many, many years, I don't want to say I'm very experienced, but I've done it for too long, so I get really passionate about it. So I'd like to do a quick comparison of the 346 model and AERMOD. As you see in the table, so the QI standards are different for the two models. 346 can only be used for Schedule 2 standards, where AERMOD is a regulatory model for Schedule 3. For averaging period, 346 can only produce half-hour results, but AERMOD can produce results with different averaging periods from 1 hour to 24, annual, 10 minutes, or 30 days. The type of modeling sources are also very different for the two models. 346 only gives you two options, point sources for the really big major stacks, and the rest will be the simple virtual sources. They look like rectangular boxes. But AERMOD, not to get into the details, definitely give you more options. And currently, it provides 5 options for sources. In terms of meteorology or weather data, 346 only allow you to model very fixed conditions. Specifically, the stability classes C and D, which are considered the most worst-case weather conditions, and with a wind speed of 5 meters per second at all times. AERMOD is a little bit more flexible in that you're allowed to use the ministry-approved regional method if it is representative and it covers your area, or you can apply for a site-specific method for your model. As far as terrain is concerned, 346 is very flat. It assumes your site is on a plank. There's no changing elevation for your site. But for AERMOD, we are using the ministry-approved terrain data for your region. In terms of level effort for the two type of modeling exercise, they're also very different. Having been doing this for many years and training a lot of junior staff doing modeling, I have to say that we can train someone to learn how to run 346 in a couple days. They will do really well. But to train a really good AERMOD modeler, it takes months to years to master. As far as the level of detail is concerned, 346 is very simple because you don't have a lot of variables for the input, but AERMOD, on the contrary, is very complex. In terms of the runtime, 346 takes about a couple of minutes to finish, but AERMOD could take from hours to days to complete. The time to analyze the results also the same. AERMOD is a lot longer than 346. So in the same sense, the cost to run AERMOD is a lot more expensive than 346 as well, because the lab effort is significantly higher. Okay, so in addition to the changes we just discussed on the modeling side, on the standard side, the ministry has actually made a lot of changes on their requirements for a compliance assessment for ready mix in the last 2 years as well. And here are some of the examples. 10 years ago, maybe to submit an ECA application, we only have to look at particulate matter and combustion gases for ready-mix plants, but now we are required to assess the constituents in the raw materials, things like Portland cement, slag, calcium carbonate, and so on and so forth, as well as the consideration of accumulated impact. For example, if you have a portable third-party crusher that comes to your site to crush concrete once in a while, for the site-wide Schedule 3 assessment, you're required to include that third party's emissions in there as well. But just to note, since it's a third party, the portable crusher will not be part of your ECA, only will be part of your assessment to make sure the site meets the requirements as a whole. The third example here is the changes to the emission estimation methodologies. A good example would be the material drop points. Now we are required to vary the emissions of the material drop by the wind speed for every hour in the AERMOD assessment. This never happened with 346 before. And then last but not least, there's definitely a much higher level of justification required for control efficiency we assume in the assessment. We need to provide a lot of background documentation to support the control efficiency we assume in the assessment for sure. Okay, so what are some of the information you have to provide to complete assessment, especially for the permanently sited plants? Based on the discussion so far, in general, definitely there are a lot more information that's needed to perform AERMOD modeling in comparison to 346 modeling. We categorize this information into 4 different groups. The first one is your facility's property line, and that has to match with what we see in Google Earth. The second one is a detailed facility layout and dimensions for structures and buildings. This is critical, especially if your site is remote and Google doesn't have a good image. We definitely need this information to set up the model, or your air consultant, of course. And then the third one will be the inputs for calculating the daily emission rates. Information such as production rate, daily operating hours, equivalent capacity. When we speak about these information, we are also including other operations on your site, such as the portable crushers, if you have one. And the last category is the modeling source parameters, things like the exhaust height, diameter, flow, and temperature for such as your loading point dust collector, your dust collector, your boilers, things like that. If you're going for ECA application, of course, you will be required to provide your administrative information, such as proof of legal name, lease agreement, if you're leasing from someone, signed application form, your payment information, that sort of thing. So now I just want to touch on the portable plants for a second, because this has been an unknown for a very long time. In terms of compliance requirement for portables, Ministry has recently confirmed the general approach for assessing portable plants for Schedule 3 standards. They require the portable plant to be assessed using either Screen 3, which is a very simple screening model, or the complex AERMOD model. The Screen 3 method, due to its simplicity, is very conservative. is not really viable for most facilities, as it really results in very large separation distances. So we are basically left with the choice of AERMOD. So with respect to AERMOD to date, the ministry has developed a composite meteorological data set by combining all regional data sets into one data set that has 120 years of data. Yes, you heard that right. It's 120 years of data. So the runtime is extremely long. It takes about, I think their testing time says about a week per contaminant. So they have already identified issues with the runtime and the removal of meta-anomalies as well, because how they collapse the data together. So this data set is currently not available on the website. For those that need to run this assessment, you may submit a request to the EMRB branch of the ministry for your assessment or for your ECA application. And then in return, they will also send you the very detailed instructions on how to model as well. Next steps. Due to the complexity of a Schedule 3 compliance assessment, facilities really should hire a qualified air quality consultant to complete this work very soon, because 2020 is just around the corner. And your air consultant will specify the exact information required to complete this assessment for you. So we definitely recommend acting soon. And that's the end of my presentation. Now we open up the floor for some questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Winnie. We do have some questions. I'm just going to pull it up here. The first question is, how will this new change affect my plant? Is it going to be better or worse? Example, more restrictions. I know you already touched upon that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's like, it kind of depends on the situation. If you currently have an ECA and then you haven't made any changes to ECA, and then you show compliant, your assessment show compliant, we don't expect any additional requirements or more restrictions on your site. But if you're going back to the ministry for an amendment due to their more stringent requirements now, you might see a level of more requirements on the record keeping, more requirement on the dust management plan, that sort of thing. In terms of cost, for the assessment, the AERMOD assessment definitely will cost a little more than a 346 assessment.
Okay. The next question pertains to the actual noise assessment. They're asking, will it open the noise assessment to update requirements?
And we kind of also discussed that a little bit, right, Ellen, in the presentation, that if you have made a change since your ECA has issued that will result in a change in your noise assessment, then you definitely will need to update it. But if you haven't, you shouldn't have to. We do recommend you speaking with a noise consultant about that to get a definite answer.
Okay. You already answered the next one. It's if there have been no changes to my plant, do I have to submit a report?
The answer is no.
No.
Yeah.
If no changes have been made, there's no point in updating anything. Will the MOE be asking for these if they inspect, and how soon?
Definitely after February 1st, 2020, they will be asking you to confirm that you have done the assessment for sure. So this work should be done before February 1st, 2020.
Okay. And what kind of impact may this have if you haven't, for example, updated your ECA, or you haven't completed the AERMOD modeling? Like, are you going to be shut down? Is it going to be penalties? What are we talking about there?
Well, it depends on how reasonable the district officer might be, but they could order you to get that done very soon. But legally, this has to be done before the deadline. Okay. Right.
And just important to note that this is not a Concrete Ontario requirement. This is an MOE requirement similar to the ECAs. So we just want to stress to members that, again, consultants need to be involved here. They need to come in, reassess your plants, and it needs to be done in a timely fashion. The next question is, what additional information will you require for this assessment?
We also briefly touched on that a little bit on the slide, and we generally, because we're talking about a daily scenario in the assessment, you will be providing the maximum daily production rate or anything on a daily basis to the consultant that's working for you. For permanent sites, you need to provide a property line. For portable plants, and you need to describe your operating scenarios. If you have more than one, things like if I'm using wash material versus unwashed material, you're using a backup, using a generator, or you're on the grid power, that sort of thing will be required to be provided. Obviously, more detailed source parameters, especially for the stacks, your building dimensions, and that sort of thing in general.
Okay. The next question pertains to portable equipment. Do you need to confirm that a third-party portable equipment, for example a crusher, has a Schedule 3 assessment to come on your site?
Very good question. I think the key here is to you need to make sure in order for that portable crusher to run on your site, your Schedule 3 site-wide assessment must include them. And whether they can go off-site to work with their portable permit, if you want to work beyond your site, they need to do a Schedule 3 assessment for themselves.
Okay. Next question. Can you remind me where I check if I have a Schedule 2 or a Schedule 3 assessment? Is it noted in my existing ECA? So you mentioned the reports?
It's in the report. You won't find it in the ECA, but if your ECA was issued, I would say, before 2005, likely you're Schedule 2. If you have your ECA is issued after 2005, you will probably have an emission summary and dispersion modeling report. We refer to as the ESPM report. In the executive summary, you should see that table.
Okay. Question here. So again, it pertains to you don't need to do anything if you haven't made any recent changes to your plant?
As long as your ECA is representative of your site, then yeah.
Okay, perfect. Now from a consulting side, obviously everybody's very busy. Mm-hmm. Do you foresee a big rush of suppliers reaching out to you last minute? And are you guys going to be able to handle the volume of requests at that time?
We are definitely try to do first come, first serve kind of a strategy. If someone wants to speak to us ahead of time, we definitely will make sure that work is done beforehand. But if you come to us the month before, I don't think we can provide some kind of a guarantee. Definitely plan ahead. Okay.
And just, I guess, a follow-up question to that is, you mentioned that this assessment will take a lot longer than the other one. Do you know approximately how much longer the assessment will take? I know it's probably plant-specific, but is there an estimated timeline of how long it will take?
With no mitigation compliance issues, usually 4 to 6 weeks. If we run into exceedances, we need to look at mitigation options. That will take longer, maybe 4 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it still can be done fairly quickly if needed?
If planned ahead.
Okay, perfect. Do we have any more questions here? Let's see. I think we've addressed everything. Do you have any other comments you want to provide to members or any other recommendations?
Well, if any of the members have any questions, you're welcome to send me an email or reach me on the phone number on the last slide, and we'll definitely have a detailed discussion and help you out.
Okay, perfect. Again, thank you very much, Winnie, for coming in this morning.
My pleasure.
For your time and expertise. I learned a lot this morning, and I'm sure our members did as well. And I'm sure I'll be reaching out to you to get some clarifications. And we'll provide your contact information in the follow-up email that we're going to be sending afterwards.
Sounds like a plan.
Perfect. Now, we did address all the questions here. Now, in terms of what's next for our webinar series, our next webinar will be on August 15th, and it is a very exciting topic. So more specifically, it's CSA 823.1/2, the 2019 edition. It was just released a couple weeks ago, and there are some significant changes in there. They've added almost 200 additional pages to this edition versus the 2014, and these are changes that the industry needs to be aware of. Our presenter will be Professor Doug Hooton. He has graciously agreed to be the presenter, and many of you know Doug on the call. He's a world-renowned concrete expert and chair of the CSA 823.1 committee. We really look forward to this webinar, and hopefully everybody today can join us on August 15th. And we're going to include the registration link for this webinar as part of our follow-up email that we will be sending in the next couple of days. So again, thank you everybody for tuning in this morning. Reach out to myself, Alan Carey, or Winnie directly. We'll send the contact information, and hopefully everybody tunes in on August 15th for another great webinar. Thank you, and have a great day.